Hey, welcome to Dataport. I'm Luke Little, head of cloud and DevOps for Epon Technologies. Today we're at Amelie's, a French bakery in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we're meeting with Nimish Donde.
Hey,
Hey, how are you?
doing good.
You want to get coffee?
Let's get it.
All right. So you are head of cloud platform and security engineering at Truist. Can you give me a 30,000 feet view of what that looks like?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. My role at Truist, as the title says, Cloud Platform and Security Engineering, is more focused on how do we really bring the cloud platform to life? How do we really convert it to a product? At 30,000 feet, I could break it down into three simple tenets. One is all about developer experience and developer enablement. How do we simplify the barrier to entry so that more products can be really delivered by this platform as the technology landscape evolves? Second is how do we address the resiliency and the reliability of the platform? Resiliency and reliability means a lot of things today, but from a product standpoint, it's making sure our customers get the maximum value. To me, my customers are the developers in the company. What they build, what they use the platform for, and how they really build the products for the end customers, which is people that bank with us, or with Truist, which is the company I'm with. And then third, and not the least probably, is the evolution of AI, and how does cloud really become a conduit for data gravity and AI to be enabled on the platform, so that people that build those products, people that are really using AI, can use the platform and accelerate their journeys.
Okay. Yeah, that's well, considering how long you've been in the financial sector, how long you've been working in the financial industry, you've been at multiple banks now. Can you tell me a little bit about the experience between these different banks, how your role has evolved from Wells Fargo, from Ally?
Absolutely. While it's been a long journey, but not long enough yet, I think working in the financial sector gives you an appreciation of where technology really intersects with regulations, compliance, and there's always a sweet spot. Throughout my journey, I started more with hands-on work, started as an engineer that was doing a lot of network and systems work, and slowly, steadily evolved to a role where I became head of cloud and appreciated more of the dynamics of not just the technology foray that the financial sector tends to sort of push the industry towards, but how do we really bring it in a manner that makes the regulated banking industry easy to adopt and easy to operate into. It's one thing to continue innovation, but balance that innovation so that it's done in a manner that the regulators have a well appreciation for it. Banks, at the heart and soul of it, is all about trust with customers. And similarly, throughout my journey, what I figured out is in my career, in the progression, in this sector of cloud, it's all about building trust with people. Obviously, different companies, different financial enterprises have different forays into it. My previous journey and role at Ally for 15 years that I was there was more about navigating a ship like Titanic, which was bound to be safe, sound, but had the flexibility of using technology as an innovation. My current role at Truist, it's a much bigger bank, much larger company, and so my role evolves to adapting, bringing people along as well. It's not just about technology, but it's also about the 80% of the spectrum, which is bringing people together, creating that influence so that people realize we have to steer in the right direction to get somewhere.
So we're sitting here at Amelie's, founded in 2008. I used to go here, or not this location, but the original location in Noda, while I was in college, not far down the road. It used to be open 24 hours a day. And now they have 4 locations. And in a similar fashion, the tech scene of Charlotte has expanded and exploded in growth, driven largely by the technology needs of banks, a growing financial sector here. Charlotte is the second largest financial hub in the United States, with Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Truist, Ally, a number of other banks having substantial presences here. How have you seen the tech scene change and evolve over the past 2 decades?
Absolutely. I mean, if we look at Charlotte and the journey, and like you mentioned, I've been in Charlotte now for almost 16 plus years. I've seen the city really transform. What used to be just a banking hub has become a tech financial hub. That's what gave rise to fintechs a while ago. That's what forayed banks to invest more in fintechs and bring them together. And we've seen throughout this journey of transformation and evolution and adaptability to the tech market as well. The skill supply demand obviously has grown. There's a lot of teams across every bank on the street that have built partnerships where there are a lot of meetups, where there are a lot of talent pool tapping into universities. There's a talent pipeline that's built into the city that has gradually grown. I still feel like there's opportunities, there's gaps. The demand is still sort of higher than the supply. One good thing was the pandemic and the talent pool really expanding. We saw people that we could tap into outside of the local talent pool, but then the same happened on the inverse where people were willing to move to Charlotte as well. It's one of the top 10 cities where people move into when you look at different stats across the ecosystem. Especially when it comes to cloud talent, SRE, DevOps. You talk about these skill sets that are a must-have for all the tech transformations that banking industry is going into. Charlotte becomes a very nice spot for people to grow their careers into. Being a product of something similar, I feel like it's a very prime spot for people to not just think about Charlotte anymore as a stop before they venture into New York or venture into the Silicon Valley. It really is a testament for what it evolves into and how it's transformed. You mentioned about Amelie's, and I think there's a theme here that resonates both with Amelie's in my view as well as the Charlotte tech industry. We saw the 2008 crisis and how Charlotte really showed grit and momentum to grow the market eventually and come back and be one of those second-tier, banking hubs today or tech banking hubs today. Amelie's faced somewhat of a similar situation. This particular location we are at, I think shut down during the pandemic, was resilient enough, and as we see now, is booming. Back after 2023 is back up and running again. So this city continues to impress with its grit. So does the tech talent. So does locations like Amelie's.
Charlotte has a substantial pipeline. Uptown Charlotte specifically, we have a number of major universities. We have UNCC, UNC Charlotte represented, Wake Forest, UNC, University of South Carolina, all having satellite campuses within within the 277 loop. In addition, we have Road for Hire. We have a number of local incentives that really drive tech talent, really drive talent in general into this banking hub, which benefits our city. And for that reason, more and more large financial enterprises are moving to Charlotte to set up operations hubs.
Absolutely.
Even when they're represented in New York or they're represented in California, they're wanting to build in Charlotte so they can pull from the local talent pool.
Absolutely.
We deal a lot with cloud stewardship, and I'm wondering on how your approach to this has evolved from organization to organization. I know that there's some common threads with banks. That's what my experience has been as well. Not just banks, but large financial organizations like Vanguard. So do you have any thoughts on this? Do you have any thoughts on how cloud stewardship is handled at banks differently? Do you have any thoughts on how best to approach this for the financial services industry?
Absolutely. Throughout the lessons I've learned in my journey as well, it's tied to cloud acts as a accelerator to the technology platform. I think people commonly misunderstand the intent behind focusing on these accelerators to really push the boundaries of what you deliver to your customers. Traditionally, IT has always been focused on maintaining operations, managing sort of the portfolio of services that require you to focus on the ground level items. It's It's understood because this is an evolution just like the industry did from mainframes to data centers at some point and modern technologies, whether it was container platforms or other themes that we saw evolve. Cloud tends to abstract those layers even more and move you and push the boundaries of the technology innovation. What I've seen between organizations is the reservation against it, but also how do you really operate the cloud service provider platforms they produce? You want to make sure these platforms are really driving value to the end customer. And I keep harping, the world that I've lived in and seen, for me, my end customers are at the heart and soul of it, developers who build products, which then these products interact with customers for these financial institutions. Those customers could be internal back office, teams, or could be actual customers who are doing mobile or online banking with the company's digital domains. Making that easy and thinking about the cloud platform as a product has always been the heart and key of how I've learned to evolve. I go back to the mantra of it's an 80-20 ratio. Technology is easy, whether it was the on-prem systems or cloud, it's the binary, it's the 20% you solve. It's the 80% challenge of bringing people together, having that influence, whether it's with your internal partners, whether it's with your risk partners, whether it's with your internal audit teams or even regulators who tend to question your utilization of the platform itself. And so how do you really embrace principles that we hear secure by design, secure by default, or compliant by default? Automation has been a key theme of everything we've done in IT, but how do you really move the barrier of automation even further to the sweet spot where self-service becomes easy, but then guardrails are really embedded in the code so that developers can accelerate it? And that's where lies in the difference of how every financial institution tends to approach their segment to cloud. That's the variation. The part or the level of work there comes back to the 80% of how do you influence people to bring it to the mindset of being treated like a product.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you see a lot of difference between newer organizations compared to older organizations, or organizations that may be more reliant on, I don't want to say legacy, but mature technologies like mainframes?
Absolutely. I think older organizations have a culture that's deep-rooted, that's embedded. So is the case about their processes, the people, the mindset. Any innovation requires you to break that cultural shift, the mindset. Newer companies have that advantage or edge where it's nimble, it's easier to adopt new things than to sort of go back and change your older habits. I'm facing this in my current role as well, and a challenge that I took on myself as to become a people, how do you really create that influence? Influence becomes the key aspect of changing or bringing that transformation. It's less about the technology, because again, technology can be implemented in 10 different ways, 10 different methods to a problem to solve it. How do you bring the people over? How do you convince this is the right model? And how do you have those feedback loops that give that freedom back to what is the value you're delivering to the enterprise? That always becomes a key. And so I've seen that transformation throughout my journey, and I continue to face those challenges through different organizations that I've moved into.
I know that we're both very interested in resiliency as a topic. And there seems to be a dynamic where consumers of more traditional mainframe applications will. So I know that we have resiliency as a common thread. There seems to be a dynamic where more cloud-oriented folks such as ourselves will speak to resiliency as a driver to migrate from more traditional platforms, where, consumers of more traditional platforms, such as mainframes, will bring up resiliency in talking about the value of their traditional platforms. And I'm kind of curious if you've noticed this, or if you have any thoughts on how to approach that conversation.
It is, and you're so spot on. To me, resiliency is a mindset. Resiliency, and I'm fascinated, or I was fascinated back in the middle of 2015, 2018 cycle, where I started noticing the DevOps culture had shifted a little, and we were venturing into an area of SRE. site reliability engineering. Ben Trenier's book and his mantra of hope is not a strategy were the keywords that really fascinated me to think more about resiliency in different aspects and apply those principles in what I was doing in my role. Gone are the days when we talk about, is my platform up 99 point some nines percentage of the time? It's about experiences we build for our customers and what we give back to them. And so resiliency is a lot more than about just uptime. Consumers or producers of technical platforms tend to still look at it in the old manner of how is it available? What is my percentage of availability and sort of the root cause analysis and everything else that drives through it. But like I said, resiliency is a lot more than just a aspect of tools or a process. It's a mantra. It's just like DevSecOps and a principle that you apply in very different dimensions. You think about all the different failure scenarios, and it's not a destination, it's an ongoing journey. You build towards it. There's never an end state to get to. You continue evolving that resiliency phase through and through across your platform, your product lifecycle. You continue to iterate and build a muscle memory against it so that you learn from your mistakes, you embrace those, you become more resilient, you are available to provide even during moments of stress, where that how you respond to stress is really how you really respond to resiliency as a whole, and a testament of resiliency.
With legislation such as DORA in Europe, I think that there is a growing focus on resiliency, on the need for resiliency, especially in the financial industry. I'm kind of curious, how do you approach executives with this message? How do you speak to it? And also, like, what KPIs do you bring into that conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating to learn from the regulations in Europe and how regulators are approaching this. And I've seen this firsthand even here with some of the interactions I've been privileged to be a part of. Gone are the days where you prove resiliency through tabletop exercises. We used to talk about blue-green canary releases or even active-passive failovers. There's so many techniques of deployment strategies or resiliency strategies that we adopt in our product lifecycle. Regulators are now no longer looking for your tabletop or your paper exercises. They want evidence. They want you to prove that under stress, you're still holding the accountability you hold towards the customers you're providing the value for. We've seen terms evolve, again, in the SRE spectrum of chaos engineering. A lot of banks have started adopting it. All it is a process and a combination of people, process, technology, or tools to it. But it's the value add that certifies what you're doing. Just like we had compliance scores for what we do and are we doing it securely or not, or we have checks and balances in our measure to govern something, there's governance around resiliency and the journeys that customers tend to digitally interact with us on. And the testament for those can be in predictive analysis, which is still, there's value in the tabletop exercises or your deployment strategies and stuff that you prove out once every 6 months and how resilient your platforms or your systems are. But there's effective balance in proving and pushing that needle forward through introduction of chaos engineering and building that muscle memory forward.
So you think chaos engineering is going to become a first-class citizen in the acceptance?
Absolutely. I think there's value in proving results out. We always look at audit readiness for cloud platforms or even your on-prem systems. You look at measures of tools and techniques applied to show compliance. Resiliency is going to evolve into a spectrum where you're going to validate that compliance of your platforms being resilient, and you're going to continue evolving it through different KPIs. One of them could be the chaos engineering results that you apply to.
Do you find that it's difficult to capture your resilience posture when you have a hybrid environment, when you have systems in the cloud, distributed systems on-prem, mainframes?
It is. The more segmented elements you have, the more custom you've got to design your method to capture the resiliency of the systems. It's not impossible, but it requires a level of maturity and it requires a level of software development principles applied to something that's traditionally looked at more operational. I go back to Ben Trenier's book, and SRE was evolved because you applied software engineers to a operational problem of keeping reliability. Similarly, these are notions where you've got to apply software principles to the notion of measuring resiliency across these hybrid ecosystems. And it becomes harder because that's not where companies are traditionally looking to invest a lot of portfolio into bringing developers and giving them that challenge to design an ecosystem that can measure it. Those are usually looked at as more of systems engineering jobs, where traditionally they're not of the developer mindset and they're looking to really maintain systems, not design them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know before I got here, I ordered a French press, which is something, it seems like every time I come to Amelie's, I order one of these big French presses. And I got to say, the coffee is really good.
It is.
Yeah.
Although I would say on some cloudy days, something stronger is preferred.
Yes. Yes.
But being at Amelie's, probably a shout out one. I've been a huge fan of Amelie's, and their salted caramel brownie, it's worth trying for. So something that I've cherished for, I think, 15 years and growing, and I would definitely love to have that at any point of the day. You mentioned about your memories, and this brings me back to sort of an olden time where me and my friends would go out at Amelie's late at night after dinner just for their salted caramel brownie, coffee, and then play some board games late night in their old location.
I have similar memories. I've always been the fan of the pistachio macaron, and I'm sure that I'm going to get made fun of by by Roman by that saying that. Yeah, I guess we haven't had drinks in quite a while.
It is. Yep.
Yeah. So, what have you been up to lately?
Couple of things. Obviously, still love the drinking scene, and something we should catch up on.
Yes.
Fan of the local craft beer in Charlotte, and I think the microbreweries have grown tremendously in size. Love the IPAs. Beyond that, trying to get into hiking. Something I cherished growing up, and I wanted to really get back to it. It's been 15 plus years since I haven't done it. I have a daughter, and I felt like something I should probably introduce to her as she grows up, in a part of my childhood that I can relive with her and see her grow into it. Hopefully she likes it. So, been hiking lately. I do have a trip planned for Machu Picchu up in March, and so I have a goal that I've set forth so that I can accelerate and at least have a North Star that I can get to between now and then.
Yeah, it's a long trip to Machu Picchu, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It's 4 days of hike, different elevation, obviously. Haven't done it, never have flown to South America, so even the culture, the country, everything's new. But more importantly, just the physical aspect of trying something new. Just like we progress our careers, doing something in personal life that I want to get back to and see if I'm up for it.
That sounds really exciting. I would like to go to Peru just for the food. It's definitely one of the food capitals of the world.
Yes, I've heard we should plan something like this as a group of friends at some point. I know
I would love
Charlotte
that.
is another food hub, so something we can explore beyond the IPAs.
Yeah, definitely. One of my former coworkers is Peruvian and has introduced me to some of the local Peruvian restaurants here. Definitely worth checking out. I'll say that there seems to be some sort of a positive correlation between the number of microbreweries and the tech scene, because as the tech scene in Charlotte has grown, so have the number of microbreweries. I think that OMB was a major turning point in that, and that was almost like a tech incubator.
Yes, it is so true. I mean, I think the scene has grown, expanded. You're talking about tech transformation, microbrewery is worth studying for how the city evolved, probably just like tech. That's such a great analogy.
Yeah, definitely becoming like a little miniature Silicon Valley.
Yes.
What about in organizations such as the ones that we've both worked for, unlocking the value of data and empowering artificial intelligence, especially when you have organizations that have systems that might be 30 or 40 years old? How do you design around that? How do you, from a security perspective, look at that problem and build around it?
I think first and foremost, it requires executive buy-in as to where your data gravity is. I know we've seen this across the industry now where the tech is shifting, and there were concerns around data protection, especially with the cloud providers. And I think that those barriers have slowly but steadily been erased subjectively in people's mind, but also proven value with what the cloud providers have brought into the system of how you can build appropriate guardrails around your data while you move those to the cloud. The,
God, I'm sorry.
the second part of this is, especially I go back to my product mindset, and as a head of cloud, how do you really eat your own dog food? Because you're providing a platform where you feel data gravity can come to life, and then the right enrichment of data really gives segue into things that you can use the data for, whether that's for the analytical purposes, whether it's to design and train ML models, whether it's to accelerate AI for the entire organization, and where that plumbing really leads to the next foray of where the technology is headed. To me, when I say eating our own dog food, it's always about cloud providers give us the ability to see that data, enrich the metadata for utilization of the platform. And if we can really build our own data warehouse, bring that transparency to life, give it back to the developers who are consuming the platform as a great feedback loop, you start giving or lowering the barrier to entry, but also shining a light on dark spaces where people normally wouldn't have paid attention to. Instead of chasing people to meet governance, to meet compliance, you're now giving data back to the customers so that they can, and again, customers here are developers utilizing the platform so that they can accelerate that journey. So if I can enrich data, build the right plumbing for it, I can eat my own dog food, but then enable the platform for real consumers and producers of data that are building products for the data ecosystem for larger enterprises. And those lessons really add invaluable support for accelerating those teams and an enterprise in how their data journey evolves.
Given the push for artificial intelligence, how do you serve as a good partner to your business, who oftentimes doesn't understand what it takes to actually derive value from data using artificial intelligence? It doesn't understand the necessity for data to be present or to be accessible by large language models.
The principle again lies in the executive sponsorship and elements of data gravity. Data being in disparate locations and not having a central data warehouse, I think has enough to really derail an organization in their journey on an AI strategy. Business obviously becomes at this point secondary, because now the distance between a business and the value added data would provide for you is still segmented away from you. And so an enterprise really bringing data gravity to life, centralizing a data warehouse, investing in that strategy to correlate all of the right elements of data cataloging, data warehousing, really bring that efficiency where you can bring the business together on that journey to use and accelerate AI. I'm a firm believer of garbage in is garbage out. And so just having data isn't enough. All the best practices that come along with data engineering really come to life. And then enriching it to train large language models really help you accelerate that momentum forward. And so some of it is laying the foundation. Then comes driving the efficiency between business and your product owners or your tech teams to build that ecosystem that really accelerates your AI journey.
Yeah, I think that one challenge that I've had is just explaining the different levels of freshness that are required for these problems. That it's okay if some data is not perfectly fresh, depending on what the use case is. It seems to be a difficult challenge for people that don't work in data day in and day out to recognize.
You're so spot on. I think some of this is, can we accelerate and balance innovation, or fail fast if we have to fail?
Yeah.
But your ability to deliver value and the pipeline there should be streamlined enough so that you can move fast. Having your business stakeholders with you to understand the agility in the process, the product mindset where you can release MVPs features smaller, I think are still lagging behind in some aspects of data engineering. But I think that momentum is still being built. And the example you cited, I think, aligns with that model where you can still, you don't have to have the entire perfect control defined. You don't have to have the entire perfect product defined. Similarly, you don't have to have the entirety of the data lifecycle defined at get-go. What you can iterate but fail fast if you have to fail, and use those feedback loops to continuously deliver a value stream in the data engineering lifecycle plays a huge value.
I think that another challenge, which speaks to the need for executive sponsorship, as we've discussed, is it lies in role-based access controls for data when using that data against a large language model. So I'm curious on how you've approached that in the past.
I think not so much with the data side of the house, but I think the principle applies. When I mention compliant by default, secure by default, or even guardrails as a code, that's a principle that fundamentally can be applied in a lot of aspects. We look at this in a regular shift left in a developer lifecycle, where you can have guardrails in code that empower a developer to move easily. It's like building a highway with enough speed breakers or speed limits monitored so that people can effectively use the road. Similarly, even in the data engineering space, that plays a huge part. Who has access to what data can be effectively designed and improved upon. And if you build those guardrails as code by default and early on in the cycle, the maintenance and the operability of it becomes really simple on the right side of it. So a lot of it requires you to shift left some of those principles and build those controls by default. One more principle that I found, and I love to share this, that's worth enough, is I've been a huge fan of reading white papers from our cloud service providers, and I look at controls as a 4-tier product or maybe 5-tier product, directive controls that are really statements of what my policy should enforce. But then we talk about preventative controls, proactive controls, detective controls, and remediative controls. To me, when we talk about guardrails, it's in that sweet spot of don't detect, because by then sometimes it's hard to go remediate and chase. It's the preventative and the proactive model that you can apply to any of these principles, whether it's role-based access controls for data or shift left in the developer cycle. The more energy and time you invested in designing your platform as a product, the better off you are, because now you are empowering your teams to move fast within those guardrails, and you reap the benefits of not having to chase them more on the detection side and then face the ramifications of everything else that happens when you don't have those effective controls in place.
So we've talked a lot about our services being a product for engineers. How do you approach the problem of establishing guardrails and gates to prevent them from creating infrastructure that could potentially pose a risk to the larger organization?
So I look at it as a tier cake model, and the analogy probably resonates a lot while we are at Amelie's and talking about their bakery products. When you think about a multi-tiered cake, it's important while baking your base cake is strong as it could be. Any cloud service provider and a landing zone that you build with it comes with you defining what are the guardrails you want to put in the landing zone. That's your base, that's your foundation. That's where your preventative controls and your detective controls come to life. Your implementation of tools or any of the cloud native features that come with it are really your heart and soul of that. That's where secure by design principles really come into effect. And so whether you're a consumer of an Azure platform or an AWS platform, you're baking in policies or SCPs or RCPs right in the sweet spot where you're defining those guardrails. Even your simple IAM boundaries are really effective in the model of what are you allowing developers to do versus what you are preventing them from hurting themselves in the long run. Second comes the next layer of cake where data becomes visibility. Having a good data warehouse for what's happening on your platform, I think, is the heart and soul of how you do it. Many different ways to do it, but having that visibility not just empowers your developers, but empowers you as a leader of the platform team or operational team that manages the platform to see what's happening in my platform. Every data is a gold mine of something or the other that leads to tell you a story. and being effectively a good reader of that story tells you how should you use that as a feedback loop, either to improve that guardrail or to loosen that guardrail for your developers. Then comes the proactive controls, CI/CD, use of Terraform, use of any other IAC product for that matter of fact. And what controls can you apply in that third tier of your cake really becomes an effective mode of delivery. These to me are proactive controls. They are pretty powerful. If we can enable developers that have standard templates on what they can build, it becomes really effective. It's reusable. It drives momentum in a healthy developer ecosystem and a developer experience model where people can inner source, contribute back to it, learn from one another, even build communities of practice that share that knowledge from one another because you're speaking a language that the developers understand, which is through code. So that's your effective third layer of cake, CI/CD, IAC, guardrails built into that pipeline. And then last but not the least is that cherry on top is where the human interaction comes to life. I'm skipping AI for a purpose because it evolves and how we apply to it in each of these layers will vary. Agentic AI tends to draw these boundaries out in the future. But in a traditional sense, there's still a human element or human in the loop as we talk even in the AI model. It's same in any conversational model. And that's your last layer and the cherry on top. How are you enabling communities of practice, center of excellence for cloud? How are you really enabling developers through office hours or mechanisms where they have self-service tools that usually lower that barrier to entry? And so that tiered model of cake is what I resonate with as to how do you really empower. And guardrails are built in each of these layers that effectively brings the enterprise and reduces the overhead on the compliance chasing aspects. It really brings a very safety element of governance. If you do this effectively, just like any tiered cake model would be built, you can always package it in a box for auditors that has the ingredients posted, wherein auditors now have full clarity on the ingredients, which factory was it made, how was it effectively made, the processes, the SOPs that really govern the making process. And so this is what really makes a platform consumable for the developers as the cake they're consuming, or for the auditors or regulators that are really looking at how the cake was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the ideal cloud program for a financial services company in a nutshell.
Yeah.
I think that it's important to point out that effectively, once you're mature, you're not necessarily telling engineers what they can't do, as opposed to telling engineers, here is a mechanism to do what you're doing rapidly.
Very true. You've got to meet people at the right place where they are at. No two customers are same, always, when we use our products as consumers or customers. And so different developers have different levels of maturity, different needs. And it's important within an enterprise to scale and meet them where the right spot exists. And so different developers who know what effectively they are doing, you can relax the guardrails, you can meet them at the right spot. There are innovators that will tend to push the boundaries. You've got to make sure you use them as a right feedback mechanism to improve the platform. Because eventually innovators tend to push the boundaries of technology for the larger enterprise. And so you've got to look at it with that human element of conversation and see where they are heading, what they're doing. As long as the guardrails are effectively protecting the enterprise and the larger good, I think it's very important. But also keep a healthy balance between those developers that want to push the boundaries of innovation versus the ones that are usually going to be focused on their product delivery, the platform or the product that really is helping a group that's not breaching from a business standpoint needs of innovation, but really are sustaining the needs of that particular business value.
Absolutely. So I think that the natural question from that is, how do you expand from that same model into artificial intelligence? How do you enable AI practitioners to do what they need to do to push the limits and apply that same model to your data and your artificial intelligence practice?
As this space evolves, I don't know if I have a silver bullet to that answer yet.
Yeah.
As a student of how the technology evolves and how the strategy evolves and what I read, the principles that I'm adhering to is still find the right mix of what can drive innovation in the space learn from it, eat our own dog food. I tend to look at this from the same angle as to how can I apply it to my platform, what I can do to accelerate the developers that consume the platform, how can I use it to evangelize it across the entire ecosystem. What works for me can potentially work for 4 other people, might not be for the rest of the group. But even if I can create that reusability of those templates, I think it becomes easy enough for others to go benefit from it. One ecosystem that I've seen recently is the growth of prompt libraries. And we're moving or venturing away from training models on small sets of data where it's not effective enough, but really using the prompt libraries as the guardrails for people to accelerate their journeys. And so in the developer experience spectrum that I'm looking at it, I'm trying to sort of reimagine and re-envision what kind of prompt libraries help developers accelerate their day one journey. What prompt libraries really act as a fast feedback loop for where they fail on a day-to-day basis, and the death by thousand cuts they seem to have with vulnerabilities, scans that are on, and can that really accelerate and asynchronously benefit them on how they can apply it to their day-to-day life cycle. In the elements of data, I feel like the journey is probably much bigger for the enterprise, but like I said, start small and apply that own dog food. To me, having a data warehouse is great. Speaking to it with natural language and being able to interpret that with the help of AI moves that needle forward, because I may have 10 questions, but across the enterprise, there are probably thousands of questions against that data elements. Even that reduces the barrier to entry and to bring data-driven decisions to life. And so those are like some of the key principles of how I see the industry evolves, how I see it grow forward, or at least where I'm anchoring towards the growth forward, being a student of this.
What about, you mentioned agentic AI, and I think that there is a natural question of how close are we to being at a point where artificial intelligence is just run books that maybe it's written to support cloud platforms, to support various infrastructural needs of large enterprises.
I think we're really close. It's not the technology that's the challenge. I think it's a little more about the people, the adoption, the fear. Is it perfect? No. Will it continue to evolve? Absolutely. The speed of innovation is probably outpacing ability for the human minds right now to evolve with it, to adapt with it. I think for smaller, very specific use cases, it's already there where it can provide value. It's a matter of people adopting it, putting it into practice, enterprises really not having the fear of delegating that responsibility back to agentic AI or tools to really do that job for them. I think it'll require a lot more practice before it becomes a reality. I think enterprises are venturing into that territory with the right amount of leadership, backing, with the right amount of risk segment applied to it. Slowly and steadily, you will see a growth of what I would like to term as digital assistants. And this is a borrowed term I've heard from leaders across the industry, where agents are merely digital assistants working to do or execute a set of tasks with a set of responsibilities to it. And their span of control could evolve or reduce based on how effective the agentic AI integrations would work. We could potentially in the future see a Scrum team of a couple of developers with agents that are really a member of that Scrum team, asynchronously helping that two development resources to grow their development or the product lifecycle that they're working on. And so while it'll take a while for the industry to adopt and get there, I think slowly, steadily, those barriers to entry and the mindset changes are happening in the industry.
So before we wrap up, I just have one other question that I want to pose to you. What do you think you would say to an engineer, a young engineer aspiring to leadership?
I think the biggest difference in everything about leadership is the mindset. It's about having clarity in thought. It's about not just embracing technology, but also understanding people and using that as an accelerator for your growth. It's about networking. It's about understanding people's mindset and applying those principles. The three things I think I would put out there is being resilient, being adaptable, and dealing with ambiguity. Those are three things that as soft skills have helped me become a better leader. And I would highly recommend for people to have that empathy built into that ecosystem as well.
Fantastic. It's a really great point. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you here. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm hoping we have to plan something again soon.
Likewise, Lucas, thank you. It was enriching to hear that feedback, and I've always enjoyed our conversation and loved this dialogue, and love to hear your insights about certain things as well. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you very much. A big shout out to John and Amélie for hosting us this morning. And until next time, let's toast to knowledge and connection, one episode at a time.
Cheers.
Cheers.